Why make a scene? It's just money. The words came through my phone, carried on a sigh so weary, so profoundly disappointed in me, that for a second I thought I was the one who had done something wrong. A faint crackle of static on the line was the only thing that reminded me this was real, a conversation happening across miles and not some nightmare dialogue echoing in my own head. I was sitting in my car, parked on the side of a street I didn't recognize, the engine silent. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, the leather groaning under the pressure. I was trying to breathe. "It's not just money, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, a low hum that barely disturbed the air. It was $60,000. It was 6 years of my life. It was my house. My voice cracked on the last word. The house wasn't just wood and drywall to me. It was a symbol. It was the finish line of a marathon they never knew I was running. It was sanctuary. Another sigh, heavier this time, freighted with the burden of my supposed selfishness. "Rowan, listen to yourself. You're being dramatic. Your sister needed a little help, a little boost. You're the stable one. You can save up again." I closed my eyes. It's a strange thing, to have your entire life's work, your discipline, your sacrifice, dismissed so casually as a minor inconvenience, like spilling a cup of coffee. I'm Rowan, I'm 29. My sister, Brielle, 26, just bought a car with my future. And my mother, Deirdre, the great enabler, had just told me that my future wasn't worth making a scene over. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't scream. The rage was too cold, too deep for that. I just said, "Okay, Mom," and ended the call. I sat there in the humming silence of my car, and I understood with a chilling, gut-wrenching clarity that I had never really been their daughter. I had been their emergency fund. A well-managed, high-yield account they felt entitled to withdraw from at will. And the fund was now permanently closed. My memory, unbidden, rewound 10 years. I was 19, flush with the pride and exhaustion that comes from working 2 soul-crushing summer jobs. One at a greasy fast food joint that left my hair smelling of fried onions regardless of how many times I washed it, the other stocking shelves at a grocery store until 2 a.m., my feet aching and my brain numb. The result of that summer of sweat and sacrifice was a 1998 Honda Accord. It was beige, had a dent in the passenger door from its previous owner, and the cassette player only worked on Tuesdays, but it was mine. It was freedom on 4 wheels. I remember showing it to my family, the key warm in my hand. My father, Leland, gave me a solid pat on the back. My mother, Deirdre, smiled and said it was a sensible choice. Brielle, then a bratty 16-year-old, rolled her eyes so hard I thought she might sprain something. "Why would you get something so beige?" she'd whined. A week later, I came home from a late shift to an empty spot in the driveway. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, filled my stomach. I found the car the next morning, 3 blocks away, abandoned. The front end was crumpled like a tin can against a telephone pole. Brielle had taken it, without asking, to show off to her friends, lost control on a wet road, and just left it there. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She dissolved into a storm of tears. She cried about how scared she was, how I would be mad at her, how her friends had all laughed. The narrative shifted instantly, the spotlight swiveling from her transgression to her trauma. My parents swooped in, not to reprimand her, but to wrap her in a protective cocoon. "She's just a kid, Rowan." She panicked, my father said, his voice pleading with me to be the bigger person, the role I was always forced to play. My mother's approach was more direct, a verbal jab disguised as maternal concern. "You shouldn't have left the keys on the kitchen counter. You know how she is. Don't make her feel worse than she already does." I was the victim, yet somehow, I was cast as the villain. I was the one left with a $5,000 repair bill that took me another year of weekend shifts to pay off. For that year, I took the bus, watching from the window as my parents drove Brielle to and from her social engagements. It was my first, brutal lesson in the family's operating system. Brielle's feelings were a precious treasure to be protected at all costs. My assets, my work, my feelings. They were resources to be consumed and then forgotten. The second exhibit in my mental museum of pain was built 4 years later. College. For me, it was a landscape of instant ramen, second-hand textbooks, and 3 part-time jobs juggled between a full-course load. I applied for every scholarship I could find, filled out endless financial aid forms, and took on a mountain of student loans. My parents' contribution was a monthly check for $100 and the occasional guilt trip about me not calling home enough. For Brielle, college was a 4-year, all-expenses-paid social experiment. While I was calculating if I could afford both coffee and a bagel, she was posting photos from her study abroad semester in Spain, which looked suspiciously like a 3-month-long beach party. The breaking point came during my junior year. My laptop died spectacularly in the middle of finals week. I called home, desperate. A new one would cost nearly $1,000 I didn't have. "I'm sorry, honey, things are just really tight right now," my mother had said, her voice full of synthetic sympathy. "Brielle's spring break trip to Cancun is next month, and we promised we'd help her out with that." I remember sitting in the dark university library, the silence pressing in on me, and feeling a kind of cold fury I'd never experienced before. I hung up, took an extra shift at the campus coffee shop, and bought the cheapest Chromebook I could find. I wrote my final papers on a tiny screen with a sticky keyboard, fueled by caffeine and pure spite. 2 months later, Brielle's Instagram was a flood of sunsets, bikinis, and brightly colored drinks. My parents had paid for it all. I paid off the last of my student loans a year ago. I'm fairly certain Brielle still doesn't know what interest rates are. The irony is, I gave them a clue. A breadcrumb. A wide-open window into my real life, and they just walked past it without a glance. About 2 months ago, I was at their house, a place I visited out of a dwindling sense of obligation, fixing my mother's Wi-Fi router for the 10th time. My work laptop was open on the coffee table, and I had to take a call I couldn't postpone. I moved to the corner of the room, turning my back for a semblance of privacy, keeping my voice low. "Yes, the due diligence is complete," I murmured into my headset, my eyes scanning the complex financial models on my screen. They were a language I was fluent in, a world of numbers and projections where everything made logical sense, unlike the house I was standing in. "The cap rate is acceptable, though I would have preferred another quarter point. Let's proceed. Finalize the acquisition of the Aspen portfolio." A pause. I listened to the voice on the other end, my lawyer, Mr. Albright. "Correct, all 12 properties. Transfer the funds from Northwood Holdings' primary account. I want the deal closed by end of business Friday." I finished the call and turned around. My mother was standing there with a cup of tea, her expression curious. "Properties? What was that all about?" Sounded serious. I felt a brief, stupid pang of something like guilt. The lie came so easily, polished smooth by years of practice. I gave her my small, unassuming smile. The one I used when I didn't want to explain the intricate details of my job. "Oh, just analyzing some market data for the firm. We're modeling a hypothetical portfolio acquisition for a client. It's pretty boring stuff, honestly. Just spreadsheets." Her eyes glazed over at the word spreadsheets. It was the magic word. The conversational kill switch. "Ah," she said, her interest vanishing completely like smoke. "Well, don't work too hard, honey." She walked away, completely satisfied. Northwood Realty Holdings, LLC, my anonymously owned, multi-million-dollar real estate investment firm, had just been successfully disguised as a boring Tuesday afternoon at the office. They saw me as a simple cog in a machine, never dreaming that I owned the entire factory. The email arrived on a Wednesday morning. I was working from home, deep in a dataset mapping gentrification patterns, the quiet rhythm of my keystrokes the only sound in my apartment. The notification banner slid onto my screen from the corner. It was from my high-yield savings account, the one I had nicknamed Project Freedom. It was an account I fed with a ruthless, automatic deposit every 2 weeks, an account I never, ever touched. The subject line was simple: large withdrawal confirmation. My blood ran cold. It felt like stepping on a patch of black ice. For a moment, you're fine, and the next, the world is tilting sideways. I clicked the email. It was a sterile, automated message confirming a transfer of funds. A transfer for $60,000. My hand started to shake. This had to be a mistake. Fraud. My mind raced. I called the bank's fraud department, my voice tight. After 20 agonizing minutes on hold, a polite but firm representative confirmed the worst. The transfer was initiated online, authenticated via two-factor authentication sent to a trusted device. The device was Brielle's phone number. She must have seen me enter my password once, memorized it, and waited for her moment. It wasn't a stranger who had robbed me. It was my own sister. I hung up, my fingers fumbling as I opened my banking app. The numbers loaded. There it was. My balance, which yesterday had been a proud, beautiful testament to 6 years of sacrifice, was now a hollowed-out shell of its former self. The transaction history showed the transfer, authorized just last night. $60,000. That number wasn't abstract. It was 312 paychecks. It was hundreds of nights I'd stayed in instead of going out with friends. It was the vacation I didn't take, the clothes I didn't buy, the cheap car I kept driving. It was every time I'd packed my own lunch. Each dollar was a brick in the foundation of the life I was building for myself, a life of peace and independence, away from their suffocating orbit. As if on cue, my phone buzzed on the desk beside me. A notification from Instagram. I tapped it open. It was a new post from Brielle. It wasn't a picture. It was a slick, professionally edited video. There she was, leaning against a brand new, gleaming white BMW X5, a ridiculously large red bow on the hood. Cheesy, upbeat pop music pulsed as the camera panned over the pristine leather interior. Comments from her friends were already flooding in. OMG goals. You deserve it, queen. So proud of you. The caption read, manifested my dream ride. Sparkles work hard, play harder. #girlboss #blessed. I stared at the screen, at my sister posing with the stolen bricks of my future. She hadn't just stolen my money. She had stolen my escape route. And she was celebrating it for the world to see. I didn't call. This was not a conversation for the phone. I grabbed my keys and drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house felt like an eternity and a split second all at once. My mind was a maelstrom of rage and a strange, desolate calm. The BMW was in the driveway, a gleaming white monument to my betrayal. It was even more offensive in person. I walked past it and used my old key to let myself in. They were in the living room, Brielle recounting some story, my mother laughing, my father watching with a placid smile. They looked like a perfect, happy family from a department store catalog. They stopped when they saw me. My mother's smile faltered. Rowan. What a surprise. Where is my money, Brielle? My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. Brielle had the audacity to look annoyed. She crossed her arms, a pout forming on her lips. Oh my God, relax. It's not like you were even using it. It was just sitting there. I needed it for a down payment. You needed it. I repeated, the words tasting like poison. You needed a $60,000 car. I needed that for a house. For my life. You have plenty of time to buy a house, she scoffed. God, it's always about you, isn't it? Can't you just be happy for me for once? Besides, I'm going to pay you back. Once my influencing career takes off, $60,000 will be nothing. The sheer delusion of it almost made me laugh. That's when my mother stepped in, physically placing herself between me and Brielle, as if I were the threat. Rowan, that's enough. Stop this. You're upsetting your sister. Her eyes were cold, her voice laced with disappointment. You're financially stable. She's just getting started. It's what families do. We help each other. Frankly, you're being selfish, hoarding all that money when your sister could put it to good use. You can save up again. It's just money. It's just money. The same 3 words from the phone call, now delivered to my face. The ultimate dismissal. I looked past her, my eyes searching for my father. I needed one person. Just one person in this room to see the injustice. I looked at him, my expression pleading. Say something. Please. He met my gaze for a fraction of a second. He shuffled his feet. Now, girls, he began, his voice weak and wavering. Let's not fight. Rowan, your mother has a point. Brielle should have asked, but, well, the damage is done. He sighed, a soft, defeated sound, and turned away to look out the window, his back to me. His silence would have been better. His weak, placating words were 1,000 times worse. It was the final, definitive betrayal. It wasn't just their action, it was his inaction. His cowardice. In that moment, the last frayed thread of hope I'd been clinging to for 29 years finally snapped. I was utterly, completely alone. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the house, the sound of the front door clicking shut behind me feeling like the closing of a chapter, the final page of a very long, very sad book. I got into my sensible, paid-for, 10-year-old car and just sat there, the engine off. The rage had subsided, leaving behind a vast, empty ache. I wasn't just losing money, I was losing the fantasy of a family I thought I could one day earn the love of. My hand, moving on its own accord, reached for my phone. I scrolled through my photos, a digital graveyard of forced smiles and feigned happiness. A Christmas photo where they'd opened Brielle's expensive gifts first, leaving my thoughtful, modest presents as an afterthought. A birthday photo where they'd taken us to Brielle's favorite restaurant. The Grand Canyon trip, where they'd spent most of it complaining about the heat while I just wanted to look at the view. Each photo was a lie. A single tear escaped and tracked down my cheek. I wasn't crying for the stolen money. I was mourning the death of that smiling family in the photos, a family that had never really existed outside of those single snapshots. I was mourning the hope that they would one day see me. I wiped the tear away with the back of my hand. My expression hardened in the rearview mirror. The grief was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline resolve. It was time to stop mourning a fantasy and start building my reality. With a final, decisive tap, I selected all the photos of them and pressed delete. A small pop-up asked for confirmation. I pressed it without hesitation. Then, I navigated to my contacts and found the name I was looking for, Albright, ESQ, it rang twice. Mr. Albright, Rowan Thorne speaking. My voice was steady, professional. Unemotional. We're greenlighting the Aspen Road termination. Yes, effective immediately. Send the server. If you're finding yourself furious on Rowan's behalf, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the fallout. And let us know in the comments what city you're watching from. Every comment helps the story reach more people. Thank you so much for your support. The moment I got home, I opened my laptop. It was time to pull the weeds. It was a methodical, satisfyingly silent purge, a digital scorched earth policy. First, the joint family emergency savings account. An account I had set up years ago, and into which I was the only one who had ever deposited a single cent. I transferred the remaining $4,782.19 to my personal checking account and initiated the account closure. Click. Next, the family cell phone plan. All four of us were on a plan under my name, a financial courtesy I'd extended when Brielle was still in college. I logged into the provider's portal. Deirdre's line, Leland's line, Brielle's line. Port out authorization, denied. Service termination scheduled for the end of the billing cycle, in 3 days. Click. Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, Spotify Premium. All billed to my credit card, with their profiles happily nestled next to mine. I logged into each service. Deirdre, Leland, Brielle. Delete profile. Delete profile. Delete profile. Then, I changed the passwords. Click. 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 It took less than 15 minutes to dismantle the entire scaffolding of financial support I had unknowingly provided for years. I felt nothing but a quiet, clean sense of order being restored. Later that evening, I got a fraud alert from my credit card. Brielle had attempted to purchase a $1,200 handbag online using the card details saved to her browser. Declined. I smiled. The text started about 3 hours later. The first was from my mother, Netflix isn't working. The password must have changed. What is it? I ignored it. An hour later, from Brielle, my card was just declined at Starbucks. It was the joint account debit card. Fix it. I'm in the drive-thru. I archived the message. Then, inevitably, the flying monkeys were released. A text from my Aunt Jillian's sister, someone I barely knew, your mother is heartbroken. How could you do this to your own family over some money? Followed by a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 6 months, hey, your mom said you're being cruel over a car. Not cool, Rowan. That's your family. I didn't reply. I just blocked the numbers. One by one, as the messages from their sympathizers rolled in, I blocked them all. I was building a fortress of silence, and they were all on the outside. A week passed. A week of beautiful, uninterrupted silence from my family. I knew it was the calm before the storm. They had likely been trying to call, but my phone was set to block all unknown numbers and any numbers not in my contacts. The financial lifelines were cut, and they were finally feeling the cold. The storm broke on a Tuesday evening. I was coming up the walkway to my apartment building when I saw them waiting for me. Deirdre, Leland, and Brielle. They looked rumpled and furious. They had ambushed me. Rowan, this has gone on long enough, my mother started, her voice shrill, a stark contrast to her usual placid tones. You will turn our phones back on and you will give Brielle her spending money. Brielle chimed in, her voice a petulant whine. I had to use my own money for gas. Do you know how humiliating that is? And my phone is going to be shut off tomorrow. I just stood there, my keys in my hand, and looked at them. I felt strangely detached, like a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. This was their extinction burst, the final, frantic thrashing before the end. As they were escalating, their voices getting louder and drawing the attention of my neighbors, a calm, professionally dressed man in a neat suit walked up the path. He was holding a large manila envelope. He glanced at the building directory, then looked at my father. Mr. Leland Thorne? He asked, his voice polite but firm. My father, annoyed at the interruption, snapped, yes, what is it? The man handed him the envelope. You've been served. He gave a curt nod, turned, and walked away, his job done. My family stared at the envelope. My mother snatched it from my father's hand. What is this nonsense? Is this from you, Rowan? More drama. She ripped it open. Her eyes scanned the document inside, her brow furrowed in confusion. Leland took it from her. His face cycled through confusion, then disbelief, then a dawning, pale-faced horror. His hands began to tremble. This can't be right, he stammered. It's an eviction notice. A 30-day notice of lease termination. Brielle scoffed, snatching the paper. Her eyes scanned it quickly. See? The stupid landlord sold the house from under us. This is all your fault. If you hadn't caused so much trouble, this wouldn't have happened. Now we really need your help, Rowan. You have to help us find a place. They all looked at me, the expectation clear in their eyes. The responsible one. The one who cleans up the messes. I took a deep breath. It was time. The landlord didn't sell, I said, my voice cutting through the evening air, calm and clear as a bell. They stared at me. The notice is from the property owner, I continued, letting the words hang in the air, each one a carefully placed stone. A company called Northwood Realty Holdings. My father's eyes widened slightly. The name was familiar. He remembered my phone call. A flicker of impossible understanding crossed his face. Northwood Realty Holdings, I said, meeting his gaze directly, holding it, is my company. I bought this entire block, including your rental house, 4 months ago. And I am terminating your lease. You have 30 days to vacate my property. Silence. A profound, echoing silence that swallowed the sound of the evening traffic. The three of them stood frozen, a tableau of disbelief, the gears in their minds grinding to a halt as they tried to process a reality they were incapable of comprehending. The first sound was the soft clatter of plastic on concrete. Brielle's electronic key fob for her brand-new BMW, the one she'd been nervously fidgeting with, had slipped from her nerveless fingers. Her perfectly made-up face, usually a mask of smug confidence, had cracked. Her mouth was slightly open, her eyes wide and blank. Then, the disbelief curdled into rage. "You're lying," she shrieked, her voice thin and hysterical. "You can't. This is illegal. I'm going to sue you for harassment." My mother, Deirdre, made a small gasping sound, like she couldn't get enough air. Her hand flew to her chest, and she stumbled back a step, leaning against the brick wall of my apartment building for support. All the color had drained from her face, leaving behind a pasty, gray pallor. The fierce, protective mama bear was gone, replaced by a frail, horrified woman. She just kept shaking her head, muttering, "No, no, no." But my eyes were on my father. Leland, the man whose betrayal had been quietest and therefore the deepest, seemed to age a decade in that single moment. The legal papers fluttered from his trembling hand and scattered on the ground at his feet. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying cocktail of emotions, shock, fear, awe, and for the first time in my life, a sliver of what looked like respect. He finally saw me. Not as the sensible, boring daughter, but as a force he had fatally underestimated. Their entire universe, a world built on the bedrock of my silent, unending support and their casual disregard for it, had just been leveled by a single, undeniable truth. It was my mother who spoke first, her voice a reedy whisper, cracking with a desperation I had never heard before. She pushed herself off the wall, taking a weak step toward me. "Rowan, please," she begged, the word foreign in her mouth. "You can't, we're your family. Think of your grandparents, what would they say?" I looked at each of them. At Brielle, still sputtering about lawyers, her threats as empty as her Instagram captions. At my father, a statue of regret, finally understanding the true cost of his cowardice. And finally, at my mother, whose definition of family was a one-way street paved with my money and my patience, now trying to use that same word as a shield. My final words were not shouted. They were not emotional. They were delivered with the calm, chilling finality of a judge's gavel. You told me not to make a scene, I said, my voice steady. You told me it was just money. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over them one last time, 3 strangers standing on my property. This isn't a scene. This is just business. You were right. I turned, walked into my building, and closed the heavy door behind me, the solid thud echoing in the suddenly empty lobby. I didn't look back. I left them standing there, among the scattered ruins of the world they had forced me to tear down. They spent my entire life making me the responsible one, the one who cleans up the messes and pays the bills. So I finally did my job one last time. So, Reddit. Am I the asshole? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of epic revenge, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.